Hello and welcome to Talking Live on Dr. Robi Ludwig right here in Starshop Studio in Times Square. Today we are interviewing, you know her well, Gretchen Carlson. She's a TV commentator. She is author of this amazing book, Be Fierce, and now you are, tell me again, executive director of Miss America,
Executive
right?
chair.
Executive chair. I can't get it. The title's long.
It's fine.
And you were a Miss America.
Yeah, eons ago.
Well, and I think we have a picture of you.
Oh, no.
From those days, yes.
Nope. Oh, there it is.
You know, you're
Yeah.
beautiful there, but you're even more beautiful now.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not do that hair again. Or that eye makeup.
I look at some old pictures too, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, a lot has happened since we've seen each other last. I mean, we certainly have worked together when you were on Fox and Friends and when you had your own show talking about various psychological issues. And now you are really on a mission. You were leading the way, really, of this, what's now called the Me Too and Time's Up movement.
Right.
And it's a long time coming. And you really, I remember when I heard stories of you suing Fox, right, for sexual harassment. I was thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to turn out? I was a little worried because, you know, in our business, the advice is don't say anything. Don't be a problem. And you managed to, you know, win a case that's very hard to win. And really, I think, created a movement showing that nobody is too big to be brought down. And now that kind of led to a new mission for you to help other women who are in a similar position. And I have a picture of you giving a TED Talk, which I highly recommend. We're going to put links up for it.
Oh, thanks.
Where you really spoke to women around the country who opened up to you about their challenges.
Well, yes. Where were you when I needed you to talk to a psychologist?
I was right here. I was here all the time.
Could have used that on July 6, 2016 when I dove off. But, you know, I just feel blessed that so many other women have felt the courage to come forward and do the same thing that I did. It felt incredibly lonely when I did it, and it was the toughest decision of my life.
Did you think it would turn out as well as it did?
No, how could I have?
Yeah, no.
I mean, just based on how you did the introduction there,
Right.
you know, you were worried about me.
I was.
that's-
You didn't know it, but I was.
Well, no, I think a lot of people were because, you know, unfortunately, that's the way that we deal with this issue in society. Now it's getting better. But up until that point, it was like, well, you know, women should just be secret and be shoved to a corner and, you know, accept the demotion and the blacklisting and the being fired because they had the bravery to come forward and say, I'm being mistreated. You know, so yes, when I did it, you saw what happened, how people came out against me. And a lot of, you know, I had a lot of support, but a lot of people
That's right.
wanted to marginalize me and malign me. And my greatest hope now is that it's a different environment for women who can find and summon up the same amount of courage to do the same thing.
You talk about during your TED Talk that, you know, that this is not about being a certain type, right? This happens to young and old women. It's happens across cultures. And you bring up an excellent point that in the past, women were blamed. What did you do? What did you wear to bring this on yourself? And that really there was a responsibility placed on women to manage poor to inappropriate behavior.
Well, what I found out is that it doesn't matter what you're wearing. I mean,
Right.
you know, you and I happen to have on pants today, which is fine, but we probably could still find ourselves in a precarious situation.
That's
It would have
right.
nothing to do with what we have on. I found out you can be a doctor and have hospital scrubs on. You can be a member of the military and have on camouflage, and it doesn't matter. So it's really not the woman's fault with whether or not she put on makeup or what she decided to dress herself in. Sexual harassment, it turns out, is really about power. And unfortunately, most of the time, it's men being more powerful over women.
And also demeaning the other person.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. It's a
Yeah.
form of bullying.
Right.
You know, I get a lot of, you would know this better. I need to travel with you. People are like,
Anytime, sign me up.
people are like, well, why psychologically do men do this? I don't know. I mean, you could tell me, but I guess it's because they don't have a lot of self-esteem themselves, and they're intimidated by a force that might be sitting in front of them that happens to be a
Well, I
woman.
think too, in part, powerful men believe that women want them. So a lot of these sexual harassers don't identify as being sexual harassers. They see it as, oh, a woman would be flattered if I came on to her. That means something positive.
Even if they weren't in that position of power, because
It's the powerful men that believe that women want them. So
Yeah.
they get a little delusional and intoxicated on the power, and they don't realize once they lose the power, nobody really wants them.
Right, because they look in the mirror.
There are different kinds of sexual harassers, which is kind of interesting. I'll share an article that I wrote for Bella Magazine. In some cases, men don't want women around, or they're intimidated by them, or they're envious of them. So these are all ways to demean a woman and keep her in her place.
I know, but I think what was so shocking to me was that it wasn't just men in power. It was lower level employees. That the culture and within the confines of the workplace, they still supported the harasser and not the victim.
That's right.
It was like a minimum wage, tech worker. That it wasn't the boss of the entire corporation.
It's a mindset.
And
it's a mindset.
That's been the most, I think, mind-blowing thing to me.
Yeah.
Other than how pervasive this epidemic is, was that the lengths to which we will go as a culture to help the harasser and not the victim. It's incredibly troubling.
And I think it's because the powerless felt, well, this is too big, I can't win it. Or somehow it's my responsibility to navigate around it. And I think one of the things that we are in a new moment now, we are seeing, no, that's not the way it's going to be moving forward. We shouldn't have to navigate around it. It's not okay to bully someone or to threaten a person's job. And you talk about many of these women have lost their job and had to re-navigate. They couldn't even work in their same field.
Well, when you really analyze that and take a step back and think about that, we've decided that it's okay that half the population, women in this country, that it's just absolutely fine to take the American dream away from them. Because that was the truth in what I found out when thousands of women reached out to me. 99.9% of them never work in their chosen professions ever again, simply for having the bravery to come forward and say, I'm being treated in a despicable way.
Right. And I think that's something that people don't realize when they hear about sexual harassment. They stop at sex, or they stop at the myths that surround sexual harassment. They really don't go deeper and say, people are losing their dream. They're being kicked out of their fields. And Rosanna Arquette spoke to this. And she said, listen, I was maligned by Harvey Weinstein at the peak of my career. And now I'm in middle-aged, and hopefully they'll give her a chance again, because I always really enjoyed her work.
Well, it's Mira Sorvino as well.
That's right.
It's a lot of these actresses that had the you-know-what to
That's right.
not give in to the advances, and they were then punished in their careers.
Right.
But it's so much deeper than just Hollywood. I want to make sure people realize
Yes,
that,
thank you.
This is every career. This is waitresses. This is members of our military. I've heard from teachers, from lawyers, from sports executives. It's everywhere. And my great hope is that the focus will now go from high-level, high-profile journalists and people in Hollywood and people on Capitol Hill down and trickle down to all of those other professions, so that those women also get the justice that they deserve.
And one of the things that you are working on is you are working on the legal end, right? And let me get
One
this
of the
right.
many things.
Forced arbitration.
Yes.
I want to make sure that I got that right. And honestly, I did not know what forced arbitration was before I read your book.
You're not alone.
Okay, I had no idea what it was. I'm not a detail person. I would never look for it in my contract. So why don't you let us know exactly what it is and what you're working to do to change it?
Yes, so you're not alone, because most people don't realize that they may have this forced arbitration clause in their contract.
Right.
In fact, they're in all kinds of contracts that we sign every day: cell phone service, movie streaming opportunities. I mean, that detail, we don't pay any attention to that. We just sign it. But in your employment contract, you should take special care.
Right.
Because what it says is that if you happen to get into a dispute at work, you're giving up your Seventh Amendment right to be able to go to an open jury process. And instead, you get to go to this fun little place called arbitration, which is secret. Nobody will ever know what happened to you. Only 20% of the time does the employee win. You can never tell anyone. There are no appeals. And the worst part is the perpetrator gets to stay on the job because nobody found out what they were doing. And other women within the company don't know that there might be a pattern because it's all kept under wraps. So I've been working diligently on Capitol Hill to change the laws, and we were so proud in December to be able to introduce a bipartisan bill in the House and the
Fantastic.
Senate.
Fantastic.
Bipartisan.
Because as you say, I love this, you said when it comes to sexual harassment, people don't care what party you subscribe to, and
No,
that's
they
really
don't
true.
ask you before
they
they
don't
do it.
ask,
Yeah, they
what
don't- they
party
don't
do you
care.
belong to?
No, they don't care. And that's why every politician should care about it. Man, woman,
Absolutely.
Republican, Independent, Democrat. So now that we've introduced these bills to get rid of arbitration clauses with regard to discrimination and sexual harassment cases, or at least give the women and men a choice, now we have to get the ball rolling and have some hearings on the issue, get them passed, get these bills passed, and then they'll go to the president's desk, and we're hopeful that they will be signed into law.
And so if this is signed into law, how will that change the workplace for both men and women?
So specifically for discrimination and sexual harassment cases only, we wanted to keep the bill narrow so that we had a better chance of passing it. But specifically, that will mean that if you're facing discrimination or harassment in the workplace, that you will have the option of whether or not you want to be public about it and sue and have an open jury process, or if you still want to go to secret arbitration, but at least you have the choice of which one you want to do. I'll just be clear that on the day I found out about arbitration clauses, that was the darkest day,
Wow.
because it made me realize that that there may never be a way in which people would know what was going on.
And so how did you find a way around that?
Yeah, I can't tell.
Oh, you can't say
You
that.
can have my
Okay.
lawyers on, and then they can
Okay.
do round two.
Bring them on. We love lawyers on this show, so bring them on. We're happy for that. When I was looking through your book, and it's wonderful, and I just have to say I recommended it to my daughter
Oh, thank
to
you.
read. She is a sophomore in high school, and she's kind of an advocate for women's rights. I think it's something about being in the city. First of all, I was shocked at some of the tweets that you got that were so cruel and so mean, and that you put it in there, but God bless you.
Those were the nice ones, actually.
Those were the nice ones.
The nicer ones.
Some of them you want to save because they're funny, but it can be really devastating. To
No.
read
I'm
those.
I'm kidding. If I woke up every morning and looked at my social media, I
Yeah.
wouldn't get out of bed. So
Exactly.
I just wanted to give a flavor of the hate that's still out there. And people get so upset. Some of my friends, they're like, "Oh, I can't believe those horrible posts about you on Facebook." I'm like, "Don't worry about it." You know,
Yeah.
like listen, my whole mission in life, but especially in the last 19 months, has been about positive and looking forward and how can I
Right.
make a difference and how can I make the world better for all these other women who have been suffering. So I don't waste time
Yeah.
with the negativity. That's
No,
my basic
you really
message.
can't. I mean, that just holds you back. And you're on a mission and have a purpose in life. And that's so much grander than people who are in that negative space and need to lash out. But there are so many things in this book that I really love. And one of them is that after your book came out, you describe a scene in New York where people came up to you and thanked you. And you might be surprised at the gender of the people who came up to you.
Well, so we were talking earlier about how I could have never expected how any of this would unfold from
Right.
the next minute to the next day. But one of the most startling things, other than all these women reaching out to me, was that men,
Yeah.
for the most part, were the ones who were stopping me on the streets of New York City. And they wanted to say thank you, usually for my daughters, they would say, but they also would say for my sons.
Yeah.
Which is a really important part of the equation, as well as how we're raising our sons with equality and respect for women. But I think that men then became a central focus of when I was putting the book together, because I started finding out that there were so many great men out there that
That's
they were
right.
already doing great work on this issue.
Right.
And really the reality is that the majority of men want safe work environments for women. It's these, jerks that we have to try and get rid of
Right.
and marginalize. But men want to help, and secondarily and more importantly, we need them.
Yes.
We definitely need them, because as long as 94% of men run Fortune 500 companies right now, or the Fortune 500, 94% of the companies are run by men, we need them to help us.
Absolutely. And you talk about this in your book. You talk about 3 factors that we need to change. So you talk about turn bystanders into allies, change the laws, which you're working on, and to be fierce. And you give a guide in the book of different mantras that women can start telling themselves, that they are worthy, that they have a right to be in the profession that they choose, that they have a right to live out their dreams. I was so happy with that piece because that's very psychological, and I know that in the past women didn't really, it's like a vague thought and when you have a vague thought in your head, you don't necessarily have a plan. But when you're advised to think about these things in advance, it's tremendously helpful. Because my feeling is human nature doesn't really change. And that's why we have laws, right? To protect people from our primitive nature. But what's been a game changer is technology and getting information out there. So it's no longer he said, she said. And men now know that they can be taped, that there's proof out there. And that just right now in our current climate, women are being listened to.
Well, and look at how that has changed dramatically in just 19 months.
That's right.
You know, I wouldn't say that we've come full circle, but just psychologically, speaking of the mantra, it's why I wanted to do chapter 4 on my playbook for women, a 12-point plan, because it is so important if you're facing this in the workplace that you do have a plan.
That's right.
Oftentimes women feel like, you know, we can just take it, and then suddenly one day we just let it all out. And then maybe a person goes to human resources and complains, but they haven't thought about it and they don't have a plan, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
So it was really important that I laid it out for women.
Is
so
human
that they knew.
resource a safe place
Nah,
to
not
go?
necessarily. You know, I think one thing we need to keep in mind is who's signing the paychecks. And
That's right.
If the perpetrator is the person signing the paychecks, then that's a conflict of interest. So I lay out in the book more progressive ideas that I have for making the workplace operate, you know, better for these issues. I think actually companies are doing a lot of introspection right now. A lot of them have asked me to come and speak to them because they really do want to move the ball forward and change the way in which they've been operating, and they realize that they've made a lot of mistakes.
And I think men too are confused because they don't want to cross the line, and I have a lot of men in my private practice that are scared. And I said, you should be right now. So err on the side of safety.
Right, but I will also temper that with the fact that the stories that I heard from thousands of women across this country, almost all were so outrageous that there wasn't a lot of gray area.
Right.
So let's be clear. Somebody's not going to file a sexual harassment lawsuit if a man says to them, I love your blouse.
Right.
Okay? I mean, men can still give compliments.
Yeah, and please do.
You can still be friends. You can still say, hey, let's go out to lunch.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go out to dinner. Let's go get a drink. You know, that's not what I'm talking about in here. The stories were so outrageous that in 2016, 17, 18, this kind of crap was still going on at work was unbelievable.
And just also know that you can get into a consensual relationship, and if anywhere along the line legally it turns and somebody says, well, you have to continue it in order to keep your job, that's sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So I think just awareness is tremendously helpful. And I think we see cases with, you know, the Matt Lauer and the Dr. Larry Nassar. Is that, I mean, he's just, I'm so glad he's going to prison. What he did was awful.
And the people that covered it up. See, that's a huge part of the equation.
Yeah.
Think about the U.S. Gymnastics and Michigan State, where he was also employed, and people allegedly knew about this forever.
That's so disheartening.
I mean, these are some of our American heroes, these young girls that have given their lives to being the best gymnasts in the world, and at the same time they had to put up with that crap.
Horrible.
And people covered it up for
and
him.
And parents trusting this physician. I mean, it's such a violation on so many levels. And the institutions in the past, they would enable. It's called enabling. And in part because they did not want bad PR. But what's your thought about it?
So that is when you said earlier, you know, how do we solve this? Turning enablers and bystanders into allies. To me, that's the final part of the equation for really solving this. Because, again, we need mostly men, but also women, to stop being enablers.
Right.
What happens is when you are an enabler in a company, if you don't speak up, then that behavior becomes normalized.
Right.
Right? So then
Absolutely.
they just ratchet it up to the next level.
That's
And
allowed in
now
this
we can do this, and now
workplace.
we can
It's
do
okay.
this. Right. And so if you have the same amount of courage that it takes for a woman or man to come forward and say, I'm being harassed, it does take the same amount of courage to stop being the enabler or the bystander and say,
That's right.
you know what, I'm going to speak up on that person's behalf, or I'm going to say to the perpetrator, don't you ever speak to that woman like that ever again.
And basically what we're talking about, that's zero tolerance, right? So it's a zero tolerance mindset that I know that your mission will be successful in creating, that your book is successful in creating. I highly recommend it. We're going to have links up so that if you want to find out what Gretchen's doing and working on, you can get to it. I'm just going to ask you quick 5 questions, and I know you have to go, and I so appreciate you being here. What's something that will always be in fashion no matter how much time passes?
Courage.
I like it. If someone narrated your life, who would you want to be the narrator?
Oh gosh, my mom.
Oh, that's so nice.
I know. Well, she was such an integral part of getting me to wherever I am. So yes.
You always describe her well. What are you interested in that most people are not?
Classical music.
Oh, yes, because you're a professional violinist and just valedictorian of her high school class. I needed to add that in.
Thanks.
What was cool when you were young but isn't cool now?
Oh, Twinkies.
Okay. Yes, that's true. That's true. What life skills are rarely taught but extremely useful? I know you know the answer to this.
Taking risks.
Yes. Well, you do that and you do it well.
Thank
and
you,
you
Robin.
live your life in a balanced, just wonderful way. You are a wonderful role model
Thanks.
for our women out there. Please get the book. It's fabulous. I recommended it to my daughter. I only recommend the best to my daughter. I think this is useful for all women and men. We will have links up. Continue to watch what Gretchen is doing. She's on a fabulous mission. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.